Welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm Justine Reichman, your host. Today with me is Matt Spence, a managing director at a Guggenheim Partners, a senior advisor to the Good Food Institute, and a former senior national security official to the White House Defense Department. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
It's so good to have you here. This is a special edition for the Future Food Tech Conference.
At Guggenheim, I focus on leading our venture capital coverage team and co-leading our food technology team. And I have an unusual background for an investment banker working in food technology and alternative protein. And I came at it because I have this background in national security, which was always my passion to work in national security and in public service. And while I was there, I saw how connected these issues were to the security of our country and our world. So I was at the White House at the National Security Council from the first day of the Obama administration. And one of the things we thought about at the time were what's the impact of a variety of industries on climate change? And everyone thinks about cars and transportation, but we quickly realized that a big part of a contributor to climate change was actually agriculture and industrialized agriculture in particular. And if you want to make an impact to some of these big long-term issues, you need to start thinking about what we eat every day. So it began there, and then I moved over to the Defense Department, where I ran Middle East policy as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East policy for several years. And as part of the job, I was responsible for Syria, Israel, Palestine, Yemen, Iran, the Gulf states, all these non-hotspots, really sleepy countries, they're not going on. And what I realized on my dozens of trips to meet with the leaders of these countries, the leaders genuinely were as concerned with some really basic things. Are our populations going to run out of water? And are we going to run out of food? And they had wealthier populations and growing populations. When populations get wealthier, they want to consume more resources, and they often want more meat. And they were really concerned, how are we going to do these things? So I started thinking, I worked for the most well-funded and potentially most powerful government organization in history of the human race. The Defense Department has an amazing budget, an amazing military, people brave, fighting for these things, and huge technology. And there's so many of these big problems we just cannot address, and became really concerned about how to address some of these really long-term issues. And there was an interesting technology that could help with that.
Wow. So you come to this with a really unique and diverse background. And I would imagine that when you're talking to people, they're just wowed by that, because I'm listening to you and I'm like, I have so many questions, I don't know where to start, because it's not like I'm talking to somebody that's, focused on one little niche.
Yeah.
You're coming to this at a global perspective, from a global perspective, which is so important and so unique, and you have the experience to back it up. And you've seen so many different things that I can't even begin to imagine how it shapes your perspective.
Yeah, I've just been incredibly fortunate to work with some amazing people, and to be at the time with just a lot of interesting things were happening in history of our national security and our country. I think what makes it really exciting to be in the world now, not just of finance, but also around alternative proteins, is a number of the founders and CEOs of companies I work with are really mission driven. So in a strange way, it's not like we're coming from different worlds. I mean, how do you take someone who worked on war planning in the Middle East, works on cybersecurity and defense technology, and then working on how do you feed the future of the planet? And maybe what they have in common is they're all really hard problems. You're going to fail a lot and be told it's not going to work. But fundamentally, there's a pretty shared conviction that, we're trying to deal with a really big problem. And sometimes the answers to big problems are leveraging our big military, which thankfully only governments have.
Right.
And other times the answers are you find great entrepreneurs who are able to raise capital and make a great product and go through a lot of ups and downs to try to put something together to deliver something like new. So it's funny, it seems pretty far off, but actually the perspective ends up being really relevant and, has really been just a real common thing working with a lot of these
Seems like
great
it
entrepreneurs.
translates pretty well here.
Yeah, it's a very different, it's a different piece. And there are a lot of elements to why someone would want to have an alternative protein company or work on food or agricultural technology, right? Like, what are some of the biggest problems we face today? Climate change is one. I think there are kind of like 3 C's, right? There's climate, there's chaos, and there's China. Like, these are things that keep people up at night who are in the White House situation and working every day. Climate, it's pretty amazing. Like, we're realizing much more given the global drought, given the war in Ukraine, given Russia weaponizing food and trying to stop the transportation of grains. And that's creating a lot of scarcity. But the scary thing is climate change creates this, like, the opposite of a virtuous cycle. And we are having less resources. And when we do want to use the resources, it actually is consuming more water and more land. And that in turn contributes to climate change itself. So the climate change risk is enormous. There's a second risk of chaos in a lot of these developing countries, where if you look at studies of when populations get wealthier, they want better quality, more nutrient, tastier food. And meat is one of those things that they want. Now, the problem is, if you just do the math, most of these countries don't have the arable land to actually do that. And it is so much less resource and is so much more resource intensive to produce meat. And then the final piece with this is China. And we are so focused now on how is China taking a technological lead. They're investing in semiconductors and batteries and rare earths that go into making our phones and electric vehicles and wind power, and not even to mention quantum computing and CRISPR technology and 5G. And we're starting to realize, man, we need to do something to make sure that we still have the technological lead. And in fact, China is already investing pretty significantly in food technology and alternative protein. And if we're worried about, we don't have the lead and independence on technology about our cell phones, just think about what that means when it's about our food. So to me, it's a pretty deep national security issue, which frames why I'm really passionate about working in this space right now.
Yeah, I can tell. I can hear it in your voice, and I can see how it translates as well. And I can also see the value that other companies would benefit from having your insights, because I don't think that this information is necessarily readily available to everybody unless they go looking for it.
Right. I think it's a really important part of the story that I think a group of people really understand, but hopefully it's expanding. And I think why it's really a fascinating time to be an investment banker working with alternative protein and food technology and agriculture technology companies, it tails into a really interesting trend in sustainability. So you can't, swing anything around and not hit something that talks about ESG or sustainability. And if you look at just investor trends, there is so much well-deserved interest in power and energy and green power and electric vehicles and battery technology. But that is one very particular type of investment. There's a whole other type of investments that can look about how do we make the way we eat more sustainable. So to me, which makes it exciting in the space is you combine 2 really interesting things. That the national security imperative, that I think what we eat is important as anything else we're doing. And then second, how we think about what are really great investment opportunities. And because investors are coming in and they want to do the right thing for the planet, some of them do at least, but they wouldn't be putting billions of dollars of capital in if they didn't think they'd be able to keep the doors open. Right. As an organization. And there was $5 billion in venture capital funding in the alternative protein space just last year. That is real significant money. You read about companies each raising rounds of $200-300 million. The investors who are leading those rounds are some of the best, most successful, most well-respected investors around the world. These are people that our pension funds and our university endowments invest in, and they're putting money into this, which I think is a really interesting thing.
Essential Ingredients is powered by NextGen Chef. Next Gen Chef is a movement that supports food and beverage entrepreneurs around the world by fostering a sense of community and providing its members access to mentors and a wealth of resources and guidance. Next Gen Chef feeds members with the knowledge they need to build better for you food and beverage businesses so the world can have greater access to healthier food, comprehensive food education, and increased affordability. If you like what you hear on this podcast, continue the conversation or ask new questions on the Next Gen Chef app, available in the Apple Store and Google Play. Follow Next Gen Chef on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at Next Gen Chef. Join Next Gen Chef and let's change the future of the food industry together.
So when you look at these alternative proteins, and you look at it with your background and the lens that you have, because it's unique, what are you looking for as an investor? Not just as an investor though, given your background, coming from the defense fund, coming with this background of looking at in a global way, I should say.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I approach these companies through the lens of an investment banker. And what investment bankers do is they help companies determine what are their next steps financially. So investment bankers will advise Google and Facebook and Oatly, when should you IPO and how do you go to the public markets? An investment banker will advise a company and say, Disney is trying to buy you. This is a good acquisition to make. And here's what a right price is. Or they'll advise a company and say, you've raised $40 to $50 million in venture capital funding. Now, when you want to accelerate your mission, you want to raise $100 to $300 million. Let us help you tell your story, identify your financial model so investors can kick the tires and understand if they'll make money. And let's put you in touch with investors who will be good partners for you and they'll make money. So that's what bankers do overall. And the interesting thing about where I am at Guggenheim is we're putting the same resources into sustainability and technology as we do Disney and Verizon and Pfizer and Merck and what are really household names often. And so I think when I'm looking at companies that we choose to work with, we're not investing capital, but we need to get to know the companies really well to represent them and stand behind them, that this is a great company because life is long and these are really important decisions to make. So I look at a few things. I think I look at, of course, the quality of the product. I taste these products and I really care about the planet, but there are lots of ways to say the planet eating lousy food isn't one of them. You want to have something that tastes well. You want to look at the quality of the leadership team and with the vision and the entrepreneurs, with those entrepreneurs who will get knocked down and keep coming up. And then really you want to look at how good the technology is and what we think of as their technological moat. The really exciting thing about some of these companies are we think of them as food companies, but many of them are fundamentally technology companies or synthetic biology companies, have some of the most cutting edge science that happens to be delivering what you're doing through food, which is a really interesting way. And then finally, of course, you look at the finances of the business. At what point is the business going to be profitable? How much do they sell each unit for? How much capital do you need to raise? How much does the equipment do they have? And those are all the parts of telling a great story. And I've been really fortunate to be able to work with some great companies. And we've been in a position to also be choosy and selective in which companies we want to work with, because all companies don't cross that bar and aren't really ready to go into sort of the broader investor market to be ready to become true global companies at this point.
What are some of the things that you look for in a company when you're deciding to take them on, let's just say, or what are some, and equally, what are some of the red flags that would have you say no?
So we really do a lot of diligence and spend a lot of time in the inside. I mean, part of the reason a company chooses to work with an investment bank when they're raising capital is it really is critical to have an outside-in view of the nuts and bolts about how to do that. So you're going through that. So I think, again, some of the things that we're looking for is, what is the growing part of the market that they're able to address? And alternative proteins, and alternative protein is, everyone knows here, it's basically forms of protein made either through plants or fermentation or through cells or a combination of them. you want to understand is what part of the market you think they can actually go after and what's realistic and how fast is that market growing? Because that will be tied to how fast the revenues are growing. Second big piece is how do they differentiate themselves from their competition? Right now, the competition between a lot of these companies are not really with each other. 2 or 3 companies that may make a plant-based product. It's more between a plant-based burger and a burger that you made from slaughtering a cow. And so what is your comparative advantage against that? And then, at least for me personally, I get really fired up about working with entrepreneurs and CEOs of these companies who have a strong mission, have a vision, and I think just have a lot of integrity to think about the long term. And because when you form a relationship working together, it's sort of like that scene from Jerry Maguire, you're really in it together. And I think because of the background I come from, I deeply care about what we're doing in a broader mission. Now, of course, Guggenheim Partners is not a nonprofit. We are a successful investment bank that has a firm bottom line. And I think I feel really fortunate here because we're leveraging a lot of resources that can put it in to really think about what you're doing with the types of companies you're working for.
And I think that there's so much going on in this alternative protein space now. And I'm curious, why now? Why do you see it so prevalent now? Or why do you think it's so prevalent now?
It's a great question. And look, for me, my grandfather was a fisherman, right? And moved from Norway, emigrated right before World War II, was a fisherman first in New York and then in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And I remember my mom telling me stories that he really cared about sustainability of the oceans. And this was like in the 40s and 50s. So no one thought about this. What did you say?
I said he was very forward thinking.
You would think so, right? But I think what's happened now is the taste and quality has gotten better. I think all of us have this experience either in your college cafeteria, your friend who's vegan or vegetarian, and you're getting this kind of like lousy burger that you feel like you're having some cardboard. And look, it feels great to save the planet, but like, just don't drive your car. You don't need to eat cardboard. So I think the technology has gotten better that you can dig into this stuff. Like, oh, actually, like this is something that's pretty good. I think that's one. And then the other piece is, I think there's been this broader sense that people care about what's going in their body. Part of that is health, and part is thinking like, where does it come from? Is there GMO? What's the treatment of things? And then I think there is the sustainability area. I think sustainability actually matters more for why capital is poured into the business, less so than why people are eating. People say they care about the planet and they want things, but when you actually measure what people eat, it really tends to be taste and cost and increasingly health, and that's what you're not sacrificing.
If it doesn't taste good, people don't want to eat it regardless.
No, nor should they, right? I mean, in the same way, all of us know what happens when you're dealing with like a lousy cell phone or computer that you can't work, and you don't want to say, oh, well, I'm so lucky to use technology. Say, no, I want an iPhone. I want something to work. And great, it took us a while to get the Zoom set up because cameras on computers are still pretty lousy for the most part. We want something that works well, and that's the same way that we want something that people can eat well that actually really tastes good.
Yeah, and to even go further in that conversation beyond all protein, it seems that people are investing in things that are better for the planet or more sustainable. What do you think it was that created that shift in that paradigm, and why people are really focusing on investing in that?
No, it's a really great question, because you're right. It is. We've been talking a lot about alt protein, just given the topic of the future of food tech, but there are almost like many expanding rings of the concentric circle. So it is not just all proteins, but it's broader food technology, seed technology, automation, robotics. It's agricultural technology, everything from regenerative farming to vertical farming to other pieces, to broader sustainability. Like, how do you think about cars that don't pollute in the way that our parents' cars polluted? And I think there are two things that have led to that trend. One is just a broader trend of combining technology and established industries. But some of the most interesting questions are, well, what do you do when an industrial manufacturing company actually becomes a technology company? What do you do when Archer Daniel Midlands or Tyson or JBS or Cargill, some of the biggest meat producers on the planet, have a big technological piece because they got to produce things cheaper, they got to get with future trends? You know, what do you do when basically a car is not an industrial combustion machine? It's basically a computer with 4 wheels, and in fact, a supercomputer that does more things we couldn't dream of. So there was like this broader trend that technology is creeping into everything. And I think it was just a matter of time before food and agriculture really took that on. So that was just one big macro trend. And the other one is this sense that a lot of consumers were voting with their dollars saying, look, I care about investments made not in gas and coal companies and these things which are doing bad things for the planet. And when you have more people who want to invest dollars, investment firms are realizing we need to be accountable to our investor base. And you have things like the Securities and Exchange Commission wanting to have regulations that will detect how many emissions you use. And when you're doing that, companies are forced to not just cut their fuel. And if you're a company that's an airline company, you can think about what your carbon impact is. But if you're a lot of other companies, you really need to think hard, and thinking about how you use food differently creates like another type of customer for a lot of these companies.
Wow, a lot to think about, a lot to uncover, and a lot for, I think, a lot of these people that are building their companies to consider as they're going out there. So I really appreciate you joining me today, Spence. And I think
Justine, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a really exciting time and moment, and I'm feel really fired up and privileged to be a part of it.
To find out more about this episode of Essential Ingredients and access show notes, check out Next Gen Chef and choose podcast in the menu bar. If you like this episode, head to iTunes or Next Gen Chef's YouTube channel to subscribe. Learn more about Next Gen Chef, the platform that powers this podcast, by checking out our website, or visit us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Next Gen Chef. You can also check out my Instagram at Justine_Reichman. If you have thoughts about this episode or future episode ideas, leave us a comment at Next Gen Chef's YouTube channel or drop an email at team@nextgenchef.com. Thanks for joining us.